Okay, just a little recap then. So tonight's talk about the FaB, the FaB Peregrines, is by Nathalie Mahieu. Nathalie's been an active member of the LNHS for some time now. She's the Secretary of the Ecology and Entomology section, and she's been monitoring the peregrines at Charing Cross Hospital since 2007. She grew up in the French countryside and has always loved exploring the natural world. In London, she's been involved with a range of bird watching activities and studying of birds, but she's become particularly fascinated by the peregrines and knows such a lot about them. So we're delighted that she's here to share her expertise with us. So I'm going to hand you over to Nathalie now. Stop sharing my screen. Thank you very much, Nathalie. Natalie, I can't actually hear you at the moment.
Yeah, I had noticed. Sorry.
That's great, thank you.
Sorry about all this. Okay, so I'm here to talk to you about the FaB Peregrines, and I chose this as the cover and as the start because I really like it. As it shows the environment the peregrines are living in. You have a young peregrine there on the wall, and for the eagle eyes around you, you may notice there's also an adult perched here. And so this is on Charing Cross Hospital, and Charing Cross Hospital is in the west of London. And the view you have here is towards the east and the central London. So you've got the Royal Albert Hall here, the BT Tower, and the Kensington Garden, Hyde Park over here. So peregrines, anecdotal evidence that they were in London from time to time for centuries, but it's only since the mid-90s that they really started colonizing London and breeding in London. And it's also about that time that I started being interested in peregrines and watching the first few webcams all around the world. And I live at the back of the hospital, and I kept on looking at the hospital, hoping that some peregrines would come and live. And then one day in October 2007, my prayers were answered, and I was walking back home, and I saw a peregrine chasing after a pigeon just above me and land on the hospital. I very quickly grabbed my camera and a few shots, because I never knew, I hoped that it would stay, but I couldn't be sure. And one thing was obvious from the start, that this was a juvenile. And as it happens, she stayed. And she was there for many years. And from this juvenile, she turned into this absolutely gorgeous female. She was on her own for many months. And initially, we were not sure if it was a male or a female. And I wanted to give her a name. So I've used a name that could be both male and female, and I based it on Charing Cross Hospital, hence the name Charlie. Then in 2008, around May, another peregrine started joining her, and I called him Mr. C. And they bonded and tried breeding finally in 2010. Unfortunately, that attempt was unsuccessful because the nest ledge got flooded. So that's when, with the hospital, we decided that we would clean up, clear the drain, and put a nest box with cameras. So in 2011, we had the first successful breeding at Charing Cross Hospital, and we had 3 young ones fledging. But at the time, because the peregrines are a protected species, we couldn't say where they were breeding. Hence, I couldn't, when I started social media to publicize them, I couldn't say the Charing Cross Hospital Peregrines. Hence, how the FaB Peregrines were born, because that was a very generic area name. I could just as much call them the Hammersmith Peregrines, the Hammersmith and Barnes Peregrines, but didn't have the same nice ring as FaB Peregrines has, because peregrines are FaB. And so we had these 3 young, and they dispersed. And in September 2011, Mr. C disappeared. I was gone for a few days, and when I came back, he wasn't there, and I've never known what happened to him. But in the following months, I noticed that there was another bird on the scene, and strangely enough, a few days before Mr. C disappeared, I had noticed another peregrine male on the building, and from my views of that peregrine, it seemed that that new bird was that male, hence the name I gave to this one, Tom, for the other male. And Tom is still the resident male at the hospital, which makes him the oldest resident now at the hospital. We don't know how old he is, because he was already an adult when he arrived, and he doesn't have a ring, but that makes him at least 13 years old, which is a very good age for a wild peregrine. Then in 2012, 2013 and 2014, we had nice success. So 2012, we had 3 young ones, 3 male, AJ, AK and AL. Unfortunately, AJ disappeared a few days after fledging, but AK and AL dispersed successfully. Actually, one of them was here until about October, November. And then we had the following year, Basta, Amy and George. That year we had a webcam with Simon King, and those names were given by some school children. Unfortunately, again that year, Basta disappeared after a few days after fledging, but Amy and George did very well, and Amy was actually spotted a month after leaving the hospital in Sussex near Brighton. And then in 2014 we had just one chick, which I called Will. Then 2015, despite incubating for a very long time, the pair failed. We don't know why. Then in 2016, we had the miracle young one that was PF. PF is a bit of a legend among the FaB Peregrines, because he just didn't leave, and he was still with his parents in 2017 when they tried breeding, and unfortunately in 2017, the pair failed, and a lot of people were accusing PF for being the cause of the failure. But unfortunately, he had left in 2018, and they failed again. At one point, I had the eggs analyzed, and all we could see is that the eggs were not fertilized, but we don't know if we couldn't tell if the reason why was because no sperm was produced by Tom, or if it was a problem with Charlie. And then in early 2019, Charlie didn't lay eggs at her usual time, and she looked quite stressed. And then 1st of April 2019, there was a big fight between her and a new female, and on the 2nd of April, that female had taken up residence on the hospital, and we didn't see Charlie again at the hospital. Tom and I should say that as it turns out, Flame, as I called her, because I was hoping she would regenerate life at the hospital after all the failures we've had, was actually an old female. She was born in 2010, and it turns out that I had actually been there when she had fledged, and she had been on a webcam by the RSPB. She was born of the Parliament peregrine pair. So yes, so Tom and Flame really didn't lose any time, and within a couple of days they were mating, and then within 10 days Flame had laid her first egg, and that year we had 4 young, which showed that the problem with the fertility before was not Tom, it must have been Charlie. So of these 4 youngsters, once again, one of them disappeared shortly after fledging. But this one, which is a female, P9, is currently the resident falcon at Nottingham University. So she's been a mother herself many times now. And then 2020, we had again 3 eggs, but only 1 young. But that one was really seen because it was born right during the time of the pandemic and lockdowns, and you know, people at the hospital working very hard and being very stressed. They were really seeing it as a very positive sign, and having this lovely young peregrine entertaining everyone. So that was great. And then he was still here in December, and left. And then within a few days, his mother left as well, or disappeared. I really don't know what happened. And it took a little while, but after about a month, a new female appeared on the scene. And you may see here, she has a ring, and that ring says AZN, which is why I've called her Azina. She is a little bit different looking to a lot of the peregrines we usually see, in as much as she tends to have more of a dark almost black back rather than a slate grey, and she had all these speckles on her chest. This tends to be a lot whiter, with a bit of rosiness in normal, usual peregrines. She also has a lot of specks in what here is the sorry, the cheek. Again, so I'm going to have a little video, which is Tom trying to impress Azina. So it's a little bit dark, but blink and you'll miss it, as how fast he's dive bombing Azina. She really has to dive to avoid him. But you can see how in the end she's she's trying to respond, and she liked what she saw, because she's still the resident female at the hospital, paired up with Tom. And as much as I don't really want to anthropomorphize, but Tom didn't seem to like Flame, and he and on the other hand is really liking Azina. For one thing, she really likes going and doing courtship displays with him, which is one way of for peregrine pairs to bond, whereas Flame would just sit next and would be like, yeah, whatever, I'm not going. So yeah, but at the start of 2021, disaster seemed to be striking once after the other. For a start, if you can see here, the beak of Azina, the top snapped, the tip snapped, and we don't know how, we don't know why. It's not something that I've seen before, and I haven't seen it since, and we were extremely worried for a long time. But she seemed to be able to eat, and I can tell you now that it took about 3 or 4 months, but the beak totally grew back. And then she was in the process of laying the eggs in mid-March, when on the third egg, just before the third egg, an intruder, another male peregrine, appeared and was very intent on trying to get the site for himself. And because there are now a lot of peregrines in London, so a lot of the sites are very sought after, and during the breeding season, the pairs usually have to defend their territory. Not necessarily every day, but every few days is quite common. And so initially, the intruder was just dive bombing Tom regularly, a bit like what I showed earlier when he was doing the courtship display. But then they actually grappled and ended up, in a fight on the roof. I could only see bits of wings flapping from the street, but it lasted for about an hour. And after about an hour, I saw Tom emerge from it, and you can see he was all bloody, and he had scratches on his beak, he had scratches on his feet, and he wasn't really wasn't 100%. And as it turns out, we found the body of the other peregrine dead on the roof. So those battles for territories can really go to the death. So so that really wasn't a good omen, but they still managed to hatch one youngster, and it was a young female that pretty dark. So we called her Walnut. But sadly, Walnut disappeared about 3 weeks after fledging. There was a really bad day weather-wise, with a lot of rain and wind, and she probably lost her life then. However, in 2022, so last year, we had one young female again. This one we called Indy, because she just wanted things her way, and was very happy to be on her own. And she actually had to be rescued. So that's one thing that we do every year when we have youngsters, is that they're very good at flying usually, but they're not so good at landing, and that can bring them to the ground where we need to rescue them, because they would stand no chance against foxes, crows, cars. So we're there to give a helping hand and give them a ride up in the lift up onto the roof. So I'm using my cat basket. But Indy, as I said, was a very independent young lady, and she left her parents actually quite quickly. And the good news is that she was seen in Poole in April this year. So she had lived, she had survived the first year, which is very good, because most young peregrines actually do not see their first birthday. So now I'm going to concentrate a bit more on this year. So the breeding season really starts around January, when the pair starts courting, doing some flying displays in the sky, and doing some courtship displays in the nest box, where they bow to each other. And then they start mating, and mating starts around mid-February, and the first egg used to be around beginning of April, but they now are earlier and earlier in the year, and now they are more like on the 10th of March, roughly. So this year, no issue with the egg laying. So we had 4 eggs, which is pretty much the norm for peregrines. Mostly it's 4, sometimes it's 3, occasionally 5, and extremely rarely 6. But on the whole, 4 eggs. And here you have the first chick hatching. So when they hatch, they have this little, this very light white fluff. And there you have the 3 chicks that hatched this year. So they're a few days old by then. So one of the things that the peregrines do is they don't start incubating until they have laid pretty much all the eggs or all the eggs, so that all chicks are roughly the same age. So here, as it happens, one of the chicks actually took a few days to hatch, and ended up being a little bit smaller than the other two. But turns out it was a she. She was extremely feisty and always at the front for feeding. And peregrine parents are extremely good. They're very careful at feeding all their youngsters the same. And as long as the youngster wants to be fed, they're being fed. So they grow very quickly. So that's another few days. You see, they've already again at least doubled in size, and you can just start seeing the second down, and then feathers. So pin feathers start to appear. So there you've got the wing feathers and a little bit of the tail feathers. The other ones that appear first are the ones on the cheek, and by then they're starting stretching their wings and doing a little bit of flapping. And then a few more, another week or so, and they've grown even more feathers, and the down is starting to disappear. Now, you may see from the title that it says 3 young hatched and 1 fledged. And unfortunately this year, we were struck by a parasite, and 2 of the chicks died. So the first one and that feisty young female did die of trichomoniasis, which is the same. I mean, it has been a problem for peregrines for millennia, probably. It is well known, and it is caught by eating pigeons that are being infected with the parasite. It's estimated that possibly about 16% of young peregrines die of this parasite in their first year. So definitely not something rare. So we were very lucky that somehow, so the middle chick did survive, and he was ringed, and the code P60. And then another week or so, and even more feathers. There's still just a little bit of down here, and the last one to go tends to be the one on the head, giving them a little bit of a punkish look. So P60 was actually extremely good at exercising its wings and building his muscles. The ledge at Charing Cross Hospital is actually extremely good for this, because there is a big area for them to exercise. And then, so after roughly about 40 days, actually 42 days after he was hatched, he took his first flight. And so there you have him flying around the hospital, and then flying quite high. And he is still around. This is a shot I took yesterday on the ledge camera, where this is Azina and this is P60, and they seem to have quite a strong mother-son bond, because they do a lot of this sitting around together. But I've actually partially chosen this, so you can see the difference in the plumage of, so that's an adult peregrine. So they have horizontal black and white stripes on their chest, on their belly, just a bit like my t-shirt. And a slightly white with a few speckles, or in the case of a Xena, a lot of speckles on their chest, and their grey or slate grey wings and back and head, whereas the youngsters are more brown. So it's a chestnutty brown color, and the stripes are vertical and are brown and beige, beige and cream rather, brown and cream, and they go all the way to the chin. The other thing is not quite as obvious on here, but the yellow on the legs and the beak is not quite as intense, and it's something I had not actually realized, and I learned this year. So we can still, even after so many years watching the peregrines, we can still learn new things. Is that I was watching Tom and Xena were very close to each other, and I noticed that Tom's legs and beak were actually a very intense orange compared to Xena, and basically you can see the age of a peregrine by the color of their the leg and the beak. And I'm going to show you now a little, it's a compilation of clips I took of P60 one day about a month ago, with a variation of actions. So there he is on the nest ledge. He's about to take off. He's observing. And a lot of what the youngsters do in their first time is playing, trying to judge the wings. And so all these aerials are actually very good for them to practice all this. And the other thing they'll do is try and dive after pigeons, which is the same thing, and also try and knock parents off their perch and then chase them. There he was chasing his mum. So there you've got high-speed chases. And then they learn how to soar and read the currents and the thermals to gain height. There he was joined by quite a few swifts in the thermals. And that's the end of this clip. And to finish, this is a question I get asked a lot, is what do peregrines eat? Because some people are sometimes asking, oh, they will get rid of the squirrels and this and that, or they'll go and catch things on the ground. But no, peregrines pretty much exclusively feed on birds that they catch in the air. And so it will vary from pair to pair, and depending on what is available, because peregrines are actually not really that fussy. They but for this pair, the main prey is pigeons, a lot of pigeons, and starlings, mostly during the breeding season, and parakeets. And that is being demonstrated here by Tom and Flame, where Tom was actually offering Flame a present. That's part of the courtship as well. But among prey, you may be surprised to hear that you will have woodcocks. Woodcocks, they're shows that peregrines in cities actually have learned to hunt at night. So all the woodcocks are actually caught during the night as they're migrating over London. So the other thing, the other prey that peregrines are quite fond of are woodpeckers, jays. They do catch a fair amount of water birds. In particular, moorhens are actually quite a common item at the hospital, which are probably caught at the wetland centre. And ducks, small ducks, teals from time to time. In the winter, they will catch a fair few redwings, because we have a lot of redwings wintering in the cemetery, which is here behind the hospital. And you may be surprised, but they're not, they don't mind just catching tiny little things like tits, goldfinches in particular, dunnocks, and to have a little bit of a snack. Mostly the birds they catch are birds that are flying high, so you will find much fewer things like wrens or robins that tend to stick to the ground. But yeah, pigeons and parakeets is very much their mainstay at the moment. And I'd like to say thank you to Charing Cross Hospital, everyone at Charing Cross Hospital, because obviously without them nothing would be possible, and it would be most helpful. Dave Morrison, who helped a lot at the start and built the first few nest boxes, and then Steve Watson and Raptor8 for the last nest box and one of the cameras, and Louis Guillot for letting me use some of his photos for this presentation. All the other photos were taken by me, and mostly from the cameras that we have around the nest ledge. And if you're interested in knowing more, I have FaB Peregrines on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube, and I've also got the website where I'm trying to keep things up to date. So there you go. Thank you. I hope you have loads of questions.
Thank you ever so much, Natalie. That was just so interesting, and the way you've kind of observed those peregrines so carefully over such a long period of time, and you could sort of see the cycles of success and failure, and it's quite intriguing to sort of see why sometimes, some years we seem to be quite successful, and other times they need to, it really seems to be a struggle to get any kind of.
As I often say, it's tough being a top predator. It is not an easy life.
So We have got quite a lot of questions. I'm going to pop one in to start off with, which is, you talked about there are now quite a lot of peregrines, and there's obviously now these quite fierce battles for territory. So what is it particularly, because we've got a lot of tall towers in London, but there seems to be only certain sites that are suitable. So what is it that they're kind of needing to make a site work for them?
Well, they need a site with ledges where they can perch. And a ledge where they can breed. They also need food around the area, and no other peregrine too close.
So okay, and obviously the hospitals seem to be. Have they worked particularly well? Because I think there are several hospitals that have been used by peregrines. Is that right?
There is definitely the Ealing Hospital is being used. They've been successful the last 2 years. That's a recent site. I can't, off the top of my head, think of another hospital, but there are so many sites that I actually don't know.
And what is it that's meant the numbers have increased recently? What is it that's contributing to the success?
It's partially the fact that they've discovered we've had all these big towers, and it's possible that more chicks being born in cities encourage more chicks living in cities. Though one thing I forgot to say is that when Charlie was actually initially a wild seacliff bird, so she was not an urban peregrine to start with.
Okay, so I can see there's quite a few questions in the chat. Anka, are you okay to pick them up, or because I know you've had a bit of technical stuff, are you all right to do that now?
Yeah, it's just my computer is being very slow, and I'm not sure, so I might have to kind of jerk around here. But in terms of the ring-necked parakeets, Kennedy was wondering if you've ever caught a parakeet capture on camera ever.
No, not as far as I'm aware, no.
So
usually what they do is because parakeets, they go into those massive big roosts in the evening, and then they leave them in the morning. The peregrines tend to be there in ambush as they're going there, or they're leaving in the morning. So I think if someone was spending all the time at a parakeet roost, I'm sure they would manage at some stage to get a peregrine to see a peregrine, probably catch it on camera, catching a parakeet. But you know, in all these years of watching the peregrines, I've only very rarely seen them catch anything. Partially because in the city it's very hard. You've all the buildings, the trees, and everything always seems to happen behind the tree or behind the building. So,
I don't know if you saw, but there's Michelle who's talking about Brussels, which is obviously a similar sort of city. She's saying they're saying the same thing about that they go hunting near the parakeets roosting place, so where they're gathering. So that's that kind of, I got through that behavior
and actually because the peregrines have slightly shifted their breeding season, and the parakeets, it looks like the parakeets haven't, which means that during the peregrines breeding season, the parakeets are also breeding, and so that means they're not going to their big roosts, which means that when the chicks are young, there are no parakeets to feed the youngsters. That tends to come slightly later on, once the young parakeets have fledged, so they're very easy to catch, so they tend to be easy prey for the peregrines. But then when the parakeets tend to go back to their roost in the later spring. Also, one thing that some of us have noticed is that the local parakeets have learned to fly lower. I have a friend in Barnes who say that he's noticed that now the parakeets are flying, below the top of the trees rather than higher like they used to. It's a battle between the prey and the predator. I had noticed that many years ago, the parakeets in the cemetery are always flying really, really low. You never see them above the trees.
That's fascinating, isn't it? The kind of relationship between the two. So okay, back to you, Anka. See some more things popping up.
Well, we've got a few more kind of things about what they're eating. So Nick was saying, it sounds like the population of peregrines in London has risen in recent years. Has this made a reduction in feral pigeon numbers, or do the pigeons just increase their reproductive rate?
Good question. I actually don't really know. I haven't. The local pigeon population is stable. It's not increasing. I mean, I know the numbers in the cemetery. The numbers have been pretty much the same for many years now. It increased really quickly a few years ago. I think probably just at the start of when the peregrines were here, but the peregrines were already here. But it's been now stable for about 10 years. It has definitely reduced the number of pigeons living on the hospital. That's for sure. But there are still a few foolhardy ones, brave ones, depending on your point of view, that are still living on the hospital. And it's actually fascinating to watch, because when the youngsters start flying, that is their main thing. They just go and play with the pigeons, and the pigeons don't know what hit them.
Anne was wondering, how fast do peregrines fly and dive, and comparatively, how good is their eyesight?
Oh my God. Okay. Well, they are known as the fastest bird on the planet, and I'm actually very bad with numbers, so I think it's 240 kilometers an hour. They fast when they're diving. However, on a level flight, they're not that fast. So a pigeon will easily outpace them after a little while. But when they dive, even if they don't do this, 240 kilometers or whatever per hour, the dive is still absolutely impressive, and something that there's the core of us, a few of us watching most days, and that's what we just wait for hours with nothing to see, just to see the peregrine dive, because that's absolutely fantastic, and you just don't tire of it.
We've got a couple questions, very different questions about the chicks.
Mm-hmm.
Martin, on the one hand, wants to know if there's been any radio tracking done to see where the young are going off to, dispersing to. And Carolyn was wondering what happened to the 2 chicks that died. Do they stay in the nest, or does the parent remove them?
Well, the radio tracking, we'd love to, but it's complicated, and it's quite expensive. So we just hope that with the ringing, which is pretty cheap and easy, and now with a lot of the optics, it's actually a lot easier to read rings. So that's what we're hoping will tell us where the youngsters disperse to. There have been studies. I do remember many years ago, it was a Polish study where they had put some trackers on some young peregrines, and it was showing that they would tend to go in circles, so they would go on a tiny little foray for a day or two, then they would go for a longer one, and then they would go for a longer one, and then they would just go. And it also showed that a lot of them were dying in all sorts of weird accidents, or yeah. So oh yes, for the two youngsters, well, one of them actually died in the nest, and they pretty much left it there, and one of the chicks was actually sleeping on it sometimes. One of the parents pecked at it a few times, but pretty much they left it there. We removed it when we went to ring the chick. The other chick was actually taken to a wildlife hospital, but unfortunately died because it was just too much.
Poor things.
Yeah.
Andrew was wondering, when a clutch of eggs fails to develop, could the parents' diet or environment have affected the outcome?
Sorry, what again?
When a clutch of eggs fails to develop, could the parents, the parent bird's diet or the environment have affected the outcome?
It could be all sorts of reasons. It could be because they haven't been fertilized, like happened when we had the test done, or it could be environmental, when if the parents don't incubate properly, or if the eggs get wet at the wrong time. But most of the time, it's really hard to say.
Priscilla was wondering, and actually I had a similar, was thinking the same thing. You said earlier that you couldn't mention where the site was at the beginning.
Yeah.
So what's changed? Are they still?
We got the authorization from Natural England and the Met Police, and they said yes, the site is monitored. It's okay now. You can say where it is. I think that there are now so many peregrines in London that it's not quite as strict as it used to be, but they're still a Schedule 1 protected bird, so you're not allowed to go and disturb them. So,
well, I mean, Francois has a question, which I think, he said, is it legal to use rat poison in London? Yep. And or insecticides? Yep.
Yeah.
So, because he's saying that is a common cause of death for prey birds. I mean, I think you would agree with that, the use of insecticides and rat poisons.
It can be a problem, yeah. Just like they can get parasites and illness from their prey, I mean, it's a little bit harder in the city, but a lot of birds of prey are being killed by poisoned prey. And also, if we go back to the 50s, 60s, when the peregrines nearly disappeared because of DDT, that was from all these pesticides that they had ingested via their prey. That was weakening their egg shells. So yeah, it is a problem.
We're nearly on time now, but we've probably got time for just one last question, if there's one last thing to pick up from the chat, Anka.
I mean, there's one last question, which is probably a yes or no. Do you know what happened to Charlie?
Oh yes, sorry, I actually meant to mention it. Yes, she was picked up in August, the following August, she had been downed by crows, and she was very ill. So what probably happened is that she was injured in the flight with flame, because when they did the autopsy, they discovered that she had an infection in her spine. So that probably had weakened her, and that's how she ended up being down. So she was taken to the Royal Veterinary College, and they euthanized her. So yeah, not as instant, or as, you know, we don't know how long it took for the other male, but yes, it.
So we've got
tough being at the top.
Yeah, we've had various expressions of sort of, you know, sadness for various kind of members of the Peregrine family. But, you know, it's kind of, yeah, like you say,
Charlie was one of a kind. She was, I mean, yeah. I see a lot of Charlie and Azina. They're very similar in their behavior and their you know, kind of softness and maternal attitude, and Tom pretty much loved them both. And the attitude of Flame was completely different between the two. It was quite very interesting to compare.
It is actually, you know, to see that there is variation. They're not, you know, all, you know, acting in the same kind of way. That is fascinating.
Yeah, they all have their. I mean, even the youngsters, they all have their various, you know, characters and behaviors, and it's it's fascinating.
So we're going to have to kind of finish off now, because we're sort of pretty much on time, but I just do want to thank you again for what, I mean, lots of people have said in the chat as well, for a really fascinating presentation, so really beautifully kind of presented, and shows the kind of dedication of you and the kind of people that you work with, really kind of monitoring and studying, and also kind of caring for them. And I was particularly struck with the use of the lift to transport the peregrine up to the top here. Kind of like, you know, a bit like kind of like modern technology linking up with the peregrine. I thought that was a particularly nice touch. Yeah, so thank you once again, and you'll see.
No, you're welcome.
Lots of nice opportunities. Just for anybody who wants to join us for the next talk, it's on the 14th of September. It's Francis Castro who's going to be talking about the broader subject of nature recovery in London, of which looking after the peregrines is one part. So do please join us for that. You can see the event on the events on Eventbrite if you'd like to book a ticket for us. If you'd like to unmute yourself to say goodbye and thank you, you're most welcome to do that. Thank you very much for coming. And somebody did pop in about the recording. It will go onto the LNHS YouTube channel. It takes us normally about a week or two to get it up there, but it will be there. If you I try and send a message out, but also you can just keep an eye on the channel and you'll see it pop up. So thank you very much for coming.
I'll publicise it as well.
Soon. Yeah,
thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.